الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending immense greetings and salutations upon the final Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. In the previous few khutbah, we've been speaking about certain stories of engagement of the companions with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And not to say that there are no other stories to come, there are many numerous stories that we find inside the Quran and the prophetic traditions. And those stories inside the Quran and the traditions, what we should be following inside our lives, whereby we find inside the society so much falsehood and evil practices. Even Islamically, sometimes we find stories which are fables, which are made up to entice and to encourage people. That's why ulama mentioned that which is inside the Quran and the Sunnah will suffice the person to live a life of authenticity. And we specifically chose Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu because we find that in his companionship, in his suhbah, in his final few years, or the few years he had with the Prophet ﷺ, he became a close comrade. And we find that the al-mustashriqun, the Orientalists, and those sects that deviate, they begin to make a critique of Abu Hurairah. And the reason of that critique we mention is that because he's narrated more than 5,300 odd ahadith. So if you begin to attack certain personalities or certain individuals, you begin to dismantle a large portion of traditions or Islamic heritage and prophetic statements of the Prophet ﷺ. So that is incumbent upon us to understand the role of the companions. Ibn Abdul Barr al-Andalusi, the famous faqih, who mentioned that the companions are those who deliver the message. Those are the ones that the message that we're now, he's speaking because he was an Andalusian, a Spanish scholar. So you can understand what he's trying to relate towards people, that I wouldn't have been a Muslim if it hadn't been the efforts of these individuals, that they, as a body, as a Jumma, they're protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their authenticity. And those are the role models that we should be searching and pioneering inside our lives, to rally around the companions, and prior to that to rally around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So to complete this short series, we complete with this journey of Abu Hurairah, another famous story whereby he's been placed to take care of zakatul mal, the zakah of in Ramadan, to take care of that wealth that people have donated. And whilst he's on guard there, you find that a certain individual comes and begins to rummage around and begin to take some of the wealth or the property or the food. So Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, he grasps, he grabs him and says, what is this that you're stealing from the wealth of the Muslims? And this individual says to him that, leave me alone, that I'm an impoverished, a poor individual. وَعِنْدِي عَيَالٍ, I have a family members. وَعِنْدِي حَاجَةٌ شَدِيدَةٌ, I have a severe need for his wealth, so let me go. I'm only taking a small portion of wealth, it doesn't have a big effect upon it. So Abu Hurairah feels pity for him and releases him. In the morning, the Prophet ﷺ says to Ya Abu Hurairah, O Abu Hurairah, مَا فَعَلَ أَسِيرُكَ الْبَارِحَةِ, what did your captive do last night? And this is the first ishara. The Prophet ﷺ has knowledge of certain elements unseen are given to him, the Prophet ﷺ. So he asks him, what did your captive do last night? He said that he came and he complained, so I let him go. كَذَبَكَ وَيَعُودُ أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ, he lied to you, he's going to return again. So now Abu Hurairah says that now I'm going to be even more vigilant, because now the Prophet ﷺ has told me he's going to return, so he will return. And he did return the second night. And again he began to steal or take something, and Abu Hurairah, he grasped him, he grabbed him. And he said, what is this that you're doing? And again, the person began to complain and say and make excuses. And again, the human nature of Hurairah kicked in and said, let him go again. Again in the morning, the Prophet ﷺ asked him, what happened last night? And he said that he gave these excuses. He's going to return again for a third night. And so when he returns for the third night, and this time Abu Hurairah is being vigilant, I'm not going to release this individual because he lies to me. He betrays me. He's making a mockery out of me. So now when he catches him on the third time, so this individual, he says to him now that, دعني أعلمك كلمات ينفعك الله بها. Leave me alone. And I'm going to teach you some words that Allah will benefit you with these words. So now Abu Hurairah, when he hears this enticement, that certain words, certain advice, he's going to teach me something. So he says, what are these words? What do you want to teach me? He said that every night before you go to sleep, read Ayatul Kursi ila akhiriha. Read Ayatul Kursi verse 255 from Surah Al-Baqarah. Read it until the end of it. And Allah will place a guardian upon you, all the way until the morning. You will be protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this individual, he leaves. So now in the morning, the Prophet ﷺ asked Abu Hurairah that what happened last night. And he explains that this is what happened. He said he's going to teach me certain words. Obviously the Prophet ﷺ, he knows what those words are. He said, what words did he say to you? He said that he told me that every night before you retire, you go to sleep, that make sure you recite Ayatul Kursi ila akhir until the end. Sadaqaka wa huwa kadhub. He spoke the truth, but he's a habitual liar. He spoke the truth, but he's a habitual liar. Then the Prophet ﷺ asked Abu Hurairah, do you know who you was engaging with last night? These last 3 nights, do you know who you was discussing with? Who this individual was? He said, I don't know. He said, indeed, that was Shaitan. That was a devil who is engaging with you in the disguise of a human being. Sadaqaka, he spoke the truth, even though he's a habitual liar. That he's telling you how to defend yourself. He's taught you the most powerful verse inside the Quran, A'damul ayah fil Quran. That when you retire to sleep, make sure recite Ayatul Kursi every single night. And other ulama have collected other similar encounters that certain companions had. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he had an encounter with the word is al-ghul, which in the English language we translate as ghul, ghosts. Ghoul and ghosts, that somebody would come and steal from his shelf. And once again he taught him these words. In another narration I find Ubay bin Ka'ab, a person would come and pick the dates from his basket. And then he said, show me your hand. And his hand was like a dog's paw with hair all over it. That this was the devil who was coming, Shaitan who was coming in. Each of these narrations speak about that. The advice that they gave was the advice of reading Ayatul Kursi every single night before a person retires to go to sleep. And thus we find this A'damul ayah, as the Prophet ﷺ, he asked Abu al-Mundhir, whose kunya is, the name is Ubay bin Ka'ab. That's why read the manaqib, the fada'il, the virtues of the companions, whether it be inside Sahih al-Bukhari or Muslim, that you find, read the virtues of the companions, why they're so special as we began with. Ubay bin Ka'ab, that you find the Prophet ﷺ once said to him, Inna Allah amarani an aqra' alayka. Indeed, Allah told me to recite upon you, Lam yakun alladhina kafaru min ahli al-kitab, Surah al-Bayyinah. Ubay bin Ka'ab said, Wasammani Allah? Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention me by name? He said, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned you by name. Fabaka, he began to weep. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned me by name, that he's saying to his prophet, recite this surah to Ubay ibn Ka'ab. This Ubay ibn Ka'ab, when the Prophet says to him, Ya Ubay ibn Ka'ab, do you know what is the greatest a'damul ayah fil Quran? Do you know what is the greatest ayah inside the Quran? فَقَالَ فِي أَوِّلْ مَرَّةٍ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَعْلَمُ. He said, Allah and his messenger know. He asked him again, the Prophet pushed him again. He said, أعظم الآية في القرآن, after the third time, is Ayatul Kursi. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. And the Prophet said, فَضَرَبَهُ. He touched him on his chest, or he pushed him on his chest. لا يهنك العلم يا أبا المنذر. May ilm begin to greet you. That you've understood the message of the Quran, that the most powerful ayah inside the Quran is Ayatul Kursi. And Abu al-Mundhir, Ubay ibn Ka'ab, he knew what the greatest ayah was. He was just hesitant not to say something in front of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why some ulama speak about hadith, speak about adab in front of the Prophet, adab in front of a teacher, adab in front of a senior individual. If you know something, not to be hasty. He remains silent for that respect towards the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, we find dukhul jannah. Man qara'a ayatul kursi fi dubur kulli salah maktuba. Whoever reads after every single fard prayer, prescribed prayer, after the prayer recites Ayatul Kursi, lam yamna'u min dukhuli jannah illa al-maut. Nothing would prevent that individual from going to paradise except for death. Meaning that if you died after the prayer and read Ayatul Kursi, we can use these words in a literal meaning. You're on a one-way ticket to paradise. As for whether you're definitely in paradise, that's ilm inda Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the hadith, as the ulama have tried to decipher, it means. That after every fard prayer, if you read Ayatul Kursi and you pass away, you're on your way to paradise. And if you're focusing upon Ayatul Kursi inside your salah after completing it. And that's what we find that this fadl of Ayatul Kursi, that we find that many ulama have spoken about the virtue of Ayatul Kursi that we find. That's why Dr. Fadl Ilahi in his tafsir this ayah, he speaks that وَمَا أَيْسِرُ هَذَا الْعَمَلِ. How easy is this action? وَمَا أَعْظَمُ جَزَاؤُهُ. Look how simple this action is, just to recite Ayatul Kursi. Look at our daily prayer. What we do, many of us, on a daily basis. As soon as we complete the prayer, is whether to check our phone, to check our messages, speak to someone, do this, do that, busy with this, busy with that. Why can't we be busy in engaging ourselves? And then we speak about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't captivated inside statements. It's captivated inside spirituality. That's what this ayah, this greatest ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. If you study this ayah, verse 255 of Surah Al-Baqarah, it is 50 words. From those 50 words, 17 of those words are names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And each section is divided into 10 sections. And each section is a paragraph, a phrase in itself. That's how small this ayah is. And that's why you find even the siyaq, the context of this ayah, before it begins the third juz of the Quran, تِلْكَ الرُّسُلُ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْدَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْدٍ. These are some of the messages we preferred over other messages. كَأَنَّ الْإِشَارَةَ أَنَّ هُنَاكَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. Inside the Quran, there's certain ayat inside the Quran that have a preference. If they understand, that's why Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, he mentioned that there's certain places inside the Quran, whether it be Surah Al-Hadid, the beginning of Surah Al-Hadid, the 57th chapter of the Quran, which is speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the end of Surah Al-Hashr, the 59th chapter of the Quran. They speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he says that this ayah, it excels over those other ayat inside the Quran. Even those ayat are praising and glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this ayah goes beyond that. This ayah even goes beyond what is known the ayah to nur inside the Quran. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. It goes beyond that inside Surah An-Nur, the 24th chapter of the Quran. And likewise we find fi dhimmatillah, the one whoever reads this ayah after every single prayer, فَهُوَ فِي ذِمَّةِ اللَّهِ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ الْأُخْرَى, is Imam Al-Tabarani in his Mu'jam has collected. Whoever reads it after every single prayer is under the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until they come to the following prayer. Because we find it is Ismullah al-A'zam. Inside this ayah that we find, it contains the greatest name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. That's why ulama, they begin to debate, what is the greatest name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it Allah? Ismul Jalala? Is it Al-Hayy? Is it Al-Qayyum? Is it Al-Hayyu Al-Qayyum? Is it Allah Al-Hayyu Wal-Qayyum? All three names. It's a discussion that we find, but whichever one of them, فَلَهُ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. Whichever view that you choose, these are the most beautiful and glorious names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Implore Him. Call upon Him. That's when the hadith it mentions, whoever calls upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His greatest name, Allah will respond to that individual. Allah will respond to the individual who calls upon Him with the greatest name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's we find in certain narrations that we find in these two ayat that we find. Whether it be in ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah that we find, or the beginning of Surah Al-Imran. Alif Lam Mim, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. The beginning of Surah Al-Imran that we find. Or inside another place inside Surah Taha. That these three places you find, whoever finds the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside these three passages inside the Quran. That's why Rawi, the narrator of this hadith, he mentions, as for these ayat, we know where they are. As for Surah Taha, that we know the verses, وَعَنَتِ الْوُجُوهُ لِلْحَيِّ الْقَيُّومِ. Faces become humbled in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ever-living, the eternal Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's we find, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa. A simple meaning of this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa al-mustahiq lil-ibada, lil-ubudiyya. La ghayr illa hu subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's all that a person can understand in their life, that ubudiyya, worship, is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen la sharika lahu wa bidhalika umirtu wa ana awwalul muslimin. The end of Surah Al-An'am, the 6th chapter of the Quran. Al-An'am means the cattle, the beasts. But a strange thing that the whole of this surah, jullu surah, kullu surah, is all speaking about what? It's speaking about Tawhid. It's speaking about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's at the end of the surah it concludes, قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Everything about me is dedicated towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah, He commanded His messengers, told His prophets, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ. Inside Surah Al-Nahl, the 16th chapter, verse number 36. We sent amongst every single nation a people, one call, one message, أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ. Worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at Surah Al-A'raf, replete. اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. Only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have no other deity to worship except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The whole thrust of the Quran is ubudiyya, is worship, is devotion, is commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why, as we mentioned, then Al-Hayyul Qayyum. Al-Hayyu is Al-Baqi, the ever living. That's what we mentioned that certain ulama speak, what is the greatest name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? As Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, Al-Hayyu is the most complete name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ismul Kamal lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala is the name Al-Hayy subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we find in ayatihi an taquma as-sama'u wal ardu bi amrihi. Allah is Al-Hayyul Qayyum, that you find that via His command, that the heavens and the earth are all in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is owned and belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. Read these passages inside the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Himself, how He glorifies Himself subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's for us to reflect and to ponder inside our lives, because we're living in a world of glorification. Greatness of people, greatness of this. In this previous month, we could see how people were marching around, even Muslims. Glorification of this and glorification of that. What does Allah say? Ya ayyuhal muddathir, qum fa'anzir wa rabbaka fakabbir. He says to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya ayyuhal muddathir, wrapped up in your clothing. Qum fa'anzir, warn the people. Wa rabbaka fakabbir, glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa kabbirhu takbira, glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not here to glorify human beings and people that we find that even Muslims, may Allah guide these individuals who begin to glorify entities, sovereign powers, personalities, glory that we find. Al-Majdu lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Majd, glory is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we should be doing, glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not glorifying people, whether it be the living or the dead individuals. Make your tongue moist. Make your tongue moist, be dhikr Allah, with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. And the dhikr of Allah, do hearts find tranquility, find peace. Don't make the dhikr of mankind around us that we find a sickness that we're all engaged in. Allah mentioned, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ. Place your trust upon the all-living, the eternal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what a Muslim does. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-hayy, is ever-living, al-baqi, is eternal. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does place your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Muslims, that's what our creed and our belief it should be. Huwa al-hayyu la ilaha illahu fad'uhu mukhlisina lahu ad-din. It is Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the eternal, the all-living subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fad'uhu mukhlisina lahu ad-din. Call and implore upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in sincerity, calling and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's Allah then negates. That is the whole concept of negation, affirmation and negation inside the Quran. La ma'budin bihaqqin illa Allah. None has the right to be worshipped except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you find bayn al-haqqi wal-batil, bayn al-tawhidi wal-shirki, bayn al-sunnati wal-bid'ati. There has to be a distinction. It's not as some people think that everything is in equilibrium, that everything is the same. There has to be a distinction of belief that Allah lays out inside the Quran, that this is the right belief. And where those people who've gone astray, لا تأخذوا سنة ولا نوم. That's what these people they attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what their creed is. What is the Christian creed? That God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And then He ascended the throne and He rested on the 7th day. That's their creed. That's a Christian creed. That's their belief. Allah mentioned He created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ. No fatigue touched Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the attribute of النعاس that we find ulama describe. النعاس is ما يأتي قبل النوم. والنوم هو المعروف كما ذكر عند ابن عباس في تفسير الطبري that we find. أما النعاس is the prelude to sleep that comes upon human beings, fatigue, tiredness. أما الله سبحانه وتعالى لا تأخذ سنة ولا نوم. It's not befitting to say such things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we find that when people say that we should be tolerant towards certain things, that's why Allah mentions inside Surah Maryam, what is the whole discussion with the world around us? It's not about food and drink and politics and land and property. The discussion is أَنْ دَعُوا لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدًا. What you attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you say that God has a son. Mu'adham al-Nasara, most Christians, that's their belief on the face of this earth. There may be some segments who don't believe that, but most of the billion Christians on the face of the earth, that's their belief, that they attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a son. And Allah says the heavens and the earth are about to rip asunder what they attribute to Him. And da'u li-rahmani walada, that they attribute a son to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we should be engaging inside society. What they blaspheme towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What they say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا تأخذ سنة ولا نوم. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs whatever is in the heavens and the earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-mulku wal-khalqu. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created and placed upon His earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does the human being own? What does the human being possess? That we become so boisterous and boasting about our lives. That we possess and we own this and we own that. What does Allah mention inside the Quran? لِمَنِ الْمُلْكُ الْيَوْمِ لِلَّهِ الْوَاحِدِ الْقَهَّارِ. To whom does the kingdomship belong this day? What people boast about on the face of this earth. That kingdomship could be a small element, a small wealth that you own. Small dignitary that you own inside your life and you boast upon that, become arrogant about that inside your lives. Because arrogance is many shades and many colors. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like arrogance, doesn't like pride. Because everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's made us mustakhlifina al-ard. He's placed us as viceroys, vicegerents, responsible people on the face of this earth. When Allah said inside the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, that I'm going to place inni ja'il fil ardi khalifa. He said to the angels, I'm going to place a representative on the face of this earth. What did the angels say? Are you going to place upon this earth man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku dima, who's going to spill blood and create corruption? Look at the inside of the angels. How did they discover this? That the essence of the human being is rancor, spilling blood, looting, plundering, killing, haphazard. This is the nature of the human being. This is what a human being does. Is still vigilant upon the face of this earth. There's nothing to hide. Look around us inside the earth. When people are godless, a godless society, don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't have any fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the Quran says. Ya ahl al-kitab, ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawa'in baynana wa baynakum. Come to a common ground. What is the common ground we come to? That we should only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقُولُوا قَوْلِ هَذَا وَاسْتَغْفِرُ لَي وَلَكُمْ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. We find then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه, who has the right to intercede except for via the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abu Hayyan al-Andalusi inside his works Al-Bahr al-Muhit mentioned this is the most concise verse inside the Quran to highlight no one has a right. No one has a right to intercede in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That total intercession belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even those who believe or go to the view that the Prophet ﷺ in his blessed days of Rabiul Awwal that we find, that they believe that he will intercede openly for people is a fallacy, is an incorrect belief. Intercession only belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It will be granted to the Prophet ﷺ just like to some other prophets or all the prophets will be granted to a certain element. Whereby he said to the Prophet ﷺ, Irfa ra'sak wa qul tusma'. Raise your head, ask and it will be heard. Ishfa' tushaffa', intercede, intercession will be granted. It's restricted. Because we have to understand what the creed and the belief is. Yes, we do glorify, we do love. We love the Prophet ﷺ. There's no doubt about it. There should be no shadow of doubt about that. But he's still, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ. He's going to perish, he's going to die, and you're going to die as well. That's not being belittling the dignity of the Prophet ﷺ. That's highlighting the essence. Read the seerah, how when he left this world, as we find, أول إشارة ليوم القيامة وأشراط الساعة. The first sign of the day of judgment. What's the first beginning sign of the day of judgment amongst the 90 or so minor signs that we find? The first sign is the demise, is the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Read the seerah, how the companions, what happened to them on that day when the Prophet ﷺ had passed away. We left this dunya. Companions said that the greatest joy in our life, the greatest joy was when he entered Medina inside our lives. And the darkest day in Medina was when he left this dunya. Companions, they fell on the floor, collapsed, lost their mind, lost their vision, couldn't comprehend that the best of creation has left them. Even the best of people like Umar al-Khattab, he broke down. He said, any individual says that he's left this dunya, then I will amputate that person's head. That's what it shows, the element of not just emotional feeling. That's why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was selected to be first Khalifa. That when he walked and he entered upon the Prophet ﷺ, and he unsheathed him and he kissed him on his forehead. He said how beautiful you were whilst you was living and how beautiful you are when you left this dunya. And then he turned to the people. أَلَا مَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ مُحَمَّدًا فَإِنَّ مُحَمَّدًا قَدْ مَاتَ. Whoever used to worship Muhammad, used to worship him, he's left this dunya. وَمَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ حَيٌّ لَا يَمُوتُ. Whoever worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the eternal, ever living. We're not Muhammadans. We don't worship him. We follow him inside our lives because Allah has commanded us. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. Say if you claim to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make ittiba'. Follow the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُم. Allah knows whatever is in front of us, whatever is behind us. Their own knowledge, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And no one can comprehend. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. As ulama mentioned, no one can comprehend and understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except for that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discloses. Whether it be the knowledge He discloses to people. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Your knowledge is very codified, very restricted. You don't understand anything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. حِكْمَةُ اللَّهِ بَالِغَةٌ. The means wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise, فِي ذَاتِهِ. In His essence, no one knows who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. No, you cannot attribute anything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one knows the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He only discloses what He wants to us. What He told us inside the Quran and the Sunnah. As for the real entity, no one will know except for inside al-Akhirah. Whereby on that day that we find, whereby people will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. That's the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. That believers will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside al-Akhirah. Allah never lets the action of believers go to waste. That if you've been worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside this dunya, 50, 60 years, 70 years of your life, being obedient, staying away from haram, do you think that Allah will take it away from you inside al-Akhirah? Do you think Allah is not going to give you that blessing of getting to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside al-Akhirah? إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُخْلِفُ الْمِيعَادِ. Allah never goes against His promise. If He's promised something, He will grant it. The breaking of the promise is from us, that we fall short inside our lives, so we don't have that conviction in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us. Then the discussion about wasi'a kursiyyuhu samawati wal ard, about the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes maybe for some of us a technical discussion, but as we, in conclusion, all of this that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning, what can we learn from this? What can we comprehend from these ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our daily lives? In our daily lives, practice the reading of Ayatul Kursi after every single salah, in the evening. And likewise another hadith mentioned in the morning and the evening. Whoever reads Ayatul Kursi will be protected from the jinn, will be protected from the shayateen in the morning and the evening. And likewise to implement this inside our life, meaning to understand, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Have knowledge that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most high, the most great. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we should be exerting our lives in, even in the society around us. When people study aqa'id belief, it's all about being refutation of other people inside our lives. That's what many of the shabab are full of. Just to refute people, it's not refutation. Awwal shaylil ilmi, taqwa Allah, the essence of knowledge, the beginning, the middle, and the end is all for what purpose? And ta'bud Allah ala basiratin. That you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon foresightedness. That's what the essence is. The beginning is with your own self, that you know. how to implore, call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what your creed, what your belief is, what your conviction is. It's not to go around to test people inside their lives. That if people say, Allah fi kulli makan, do they actually mean that? People don't actually mean that. If you ask them, you delve into it. That's just common words that many ulama have highlighted. That's not their core belief. They believe, they know that deep down inside their hearts. If you push them, they'll say that Allah fi sama, Allah is above the heavens. Kama yaliqu bi jalali subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many of these discussions, they're not for the awam, they're not for the masses of people. The masses of people just need to learn how to bond their belief with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How to become better Muslims, better personalities, better individuals. And there's not just a few. There's not a few thousands. There's not tens of thousands. There's probably hundreds and thousands of people, or maybe millions, who existed before us, who had the most closest of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't know about it. We don't know about it, and we don't need to know about it. But that's not what the Quran and Sunnah teaches us. Quran teaches that we need to bond ourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our belief, in our creed, and exert ourselves that we have that conviction that when I recite these ayat, if I pass away, that I'm under the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq and ability to understand the speech and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to implement them to the best of our ability inside our life, and encourage the people around us, that those who may have strayed, who may not have the right belief or the right concept, to encourage them, to remind them, وَذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ, remind them about the days of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remind them about the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the forgiveness, the forgiving of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that many of us as Muslims, we fail to understand. Forgiveness, ar-rahmah, forgiveness and pardoning is for believing individuals. It's not for ha'ulai al-kafara. It's not for them. It's a sealed door for them who's passed away. It's for Muslims. This is where we show compassion and mercy. Speak well of a Muslim who's passed away. Raise their good things. As for ha'ulai, for what reason are we going out of the way to praise certain individuals or personalities, whatever it may be? Wa kufrum zahir. And the kufr, disbelief, is apparent, it's open, there's nothing hidden about it. And we're bending over backwards for it, to make excuses for it. Sunnat Allahi al-ardi wa fis samai. Sunnah of Allah inside the heavens and upon this dunya. Inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana ترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين قوموا لصلاتكم